Hey, what's up everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the Metasploit Meterpreter room from TryHackMe. So we're going to jump right in and get started with task number 1, Introduction to Meterpreter. So what is Meterpreter? It is basically a Metasploit payload that and they'll go through and they talk a little bit more about it, but hopefully at this point, if you're looking into Metasploit, you kind of understand what a shell is and what a payload is and what that looks like. So if you don't, you should maybe check out some of the other rooms on TryHackMe. I'm pretty sure they have a shells room that might be really helpful to kind of get a base knowledge to help you understand what Meterpreter actually is. But basically what Meterpreter is it is a shell that you can get on a target system. And because it's a shell that you can get on a target system, just like any other shell, it can be part of a payload. So generally the way it works is you create a Meterpreter payload, you deliver that payload, and then you can connect to your target system with a Meterpreter shell. And Meterpreter shells are really nice. They have a bunch of utility. They have a lot of commands. They have a lot of automated things. You can automate some privilege escalation. You can use a command called hash dump, and it'll just dump all the hashes from a Windows machine. So it's basically Metasploit's shell. Metasploit created this shell that they felt would be the most helpful to penetration testers and hackers, and that's what Meterpreter is. So there's a few cool things that you should know about Meterpreter that makes it a little bit different than other shells. It actually runs entirely in memory, so it never writes itself to the disk, and this is done to avoid detection. Now, just a disclaimer, we're going to talk a bit about how Meterpreter tries really hard to not be detected, but most modern antivirus solutions, they're going to be able to detect Meterpreter because we know about it. It's open source, so it's the kind of thing that, in all honesty, they should be able to detect because, everybody knows about it. So don't think that you're going to hop on a Meterpreter shell and go hack something that you shouldn't be hacking. You should never hack anything unless you have permission, but you would get caught because most antivirus are going to be able to catch this. However, way back when it was first made, and even some of the things that it does, they still are methods to evade detection. Again, it's just we all know about them, so they don't always work. But yeah, so Meterpreter runs in memory, so then it's not a file on the disk. It's not, anywhere on the disk. What it does is it just runs as a process. And what Meterpreter does by default is it will name the process that it's running in, like something common that you would find on a Windows machine. So it's when you look at it, and we'll see this as we go through the questions, we're going to figure out the process that the Meterpreter shell is running as. And you'll notice that the name does not say like Meterpreter on it. It'll say something like PowerShell or something else like that, just something really common to Windows. And that's because the way that it works is Meterpreter, once it's on a machine, it kind of injects itself into the memory, and it can inject itself into the memory of other processes. And so then it ends up adopting that process name, and it can interact with it and a bunch of other in-depth stuff that's way out of the scope of this room. But the big picture here, Meterpreter runs in memory. It is not installed on the disk. Now, as far as the network goes, Meterpreter by default, it's going to be communicating back and forth using HTTPS, so it's going to be encrypted. So unless an organization is intercepting and decrypting and inspecting their traffic, they would not catch Meterpreter traffic, okay? Because it's encrypted. So again, right here, it's recognized by major antivirus software, so keep that in mind. Now, get PID. What is this? So this is going to give you the process ID that Meterpreter is currently running as. So here in this example, they're in a Meterpreter shell, okay? So they're already inside a Meterpreter shell on their target machine. So once you're there, you can use the get PID command, and that will tell you what process you are running as the Meterpreter user. And then if you type in the PS command, this will list all of the commands. And so the way this works is it gave us a PID of 1304. Now we list all of those processes, and now we can look for 1304. And we can see that this is not named meterpreter.exe, right? It has a different name, spoolsv.exe. I probably should know what that is. I don't off the top of my head, but it's a common process that you would find on any Windows machine, right? So totally normal. So that's what it looks like. These are useful commands. Later we'll get into migrating with Meterpreter, so you'll want to know those, the get PID and PS command. And then down here, you can go even further and look at the DLLs, which are dynamic link libraries. I'm not going to get into too much of what those are. Just think of them as really big files with lots of good stuff in them, and they help programs run. That's like a super dumbed down version because I don't really want to talk about it right now, and that's not the point of the room. But the point of the room is that if you look, you can see you wouldn't find anything called like meterpreter.dll, right? So if you look through all of this would check out. It would look normal, right? So for those reasons, Meterpreter, if you're not using a updated, big name antivirus software, or not necessarily big name, but just a really good updated antivirus software, then you might not be able to detect Meterpreter. And the way that those softwares detect Meterpreter is they have other methods because it's all in memory. So stuff like that, they'll be looking at memory and things to actually identify a Meterpreter shell. But again, not important for this room. So make sure you read through everything. And yeah, the big takeaway is Meterpreter. It's a Metasploit shell, essentially. That's the way I like to think of it, a Metasploit payload. And it runs in memory and it runs in other processes. So read through all that, mark complete. And with that, you are done with task number 1. Now it's on to task number 2, Meterpreter flavors. Okay, so Meterpreter, or we'll just talk about payloads in general. Payloads kind of have 2 different versions. You can have inline or single payloads, and you can have staged payloads. So a single payload, everything is put into one payload, sent over. Pretty straightforward. Staged payloads, that'll come in stages. So here they use MSF Venom, which is a very useful tool, and it's also part of like the whole Metasploit framework, but they turned it into its own standalone tool. And if you do MSF Venom --list payloads, it is going to list all of the payloads that MSF Venom can make for you. And then they grep Meterpreter after that. So they pipe that into grep, and then they only search for lines that have the word Meterpreter. And as we can see, and this keeps going, but just here, we can see there's a ton of different Meterpreter payloads. You got reverse HTTP, reverse HTTPS, TCP. You got your different OSs, Android, Apple, iOS, Java, Linux, and further down on this list you'd see Windows, all that stuff. And then down here it tells us the different Meterpreter versions available for all these platforms, so you can see kind of all the platforms right there. And what type of Meterpreter payload or version of Meterpreter you'll use will usually depend on 3 things: the target operating system, right? Because you want to match that. The components available on the system, right? So what do they have installed? Stuff like that. Or what architecture are they using, right? And then network connection. So the type of network connection you have. And so knowing all those things, and you'll just get the hang of it as you continue through TryHackMe and doing rooms, you'll be able to identify pretty quickly, okay, what payload should I be using for in this instance? So read through all that, and then it talks about here, some exploits inside Metasploit have default payloads, and you can see that in the previous room, the Metasploit exploitation room, we exploited Eternal Blue, which is an exploit, and it has its own default payload, which is this. So yeah, keep that in mind. In Metasploit, it's really nice because with exploits, it'll just automatically know what you probably should use, and it'll often give it to you. But with MSF Venom, if you are creating your own payload to do with what you will, then you do have to keep in mind, that everything checks out and you're selecting the correct payload for the correct target. So, and then you can always use the show payloads command inside Metasploit, and it will give you a list of all the ones you could use. So read through all that, mark complete, and with that, you are done with task number 2, Meterpreter flavors. Now it's on to task number 3, Meterpreter commands. So once you're inside the Meterpreter shell, you can issue the help command, and this is just going to give you a long list of all the different commands that you can have and a description for them. So super useful, especially when you're starting out, you'll be using it a lot. And then there's some different sections. So you have like core commands, file system commands, networking commands, and Meterpreter is really nice, and it splits them up for you. So they're only showing a snippet here, and we can see the core commands right here. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'm going to real quickly start MSF console, and then I'll show you an example after that loads. But here they're just showing a snippet, and you can only see the core commands. But underneath this, there would be other headers with all the relative commands underneath them. So those are all built-in commands. When you first open up Metasploit, you'll have these built-in commands. Now, there's other kinds of tools. And you have Meterpreter tools, and those are like tools that you can download and stuff. Some of them already come with Meterpreter, and they'll just automatically kind of run if you issue the right command. And then there's Meterpreter scripting. So we won't go too far into these, just because you'll see more of them as we go through examples. But keep that in mind. But the big thing here is issue the help command. It'll list all of the commands, and they'll be nice and organized in categories for you. So it should be pretty easy to narrow down. And here is an example of that. You have all your core commands, file system, networking, system commands, other commands that you might have. So read through all that, familiarize yourself with some of these. Some of these you use a lot, some of them you don't use very often, but you should at least be semi-familiar with them. So read through that and mark complete. And with that, you are done with task number 3. Now it's on to task number 4, Post-Exploitation with Meterpreter. So once you are in Meterpreter or have a Meterpreter shell on a target system, then what you can do is you can use Meterpreter commands that are built in, and they will help you with post-exploitation. So one command that you'll always want to use is get UID, which stands for get user ID, and this will tell you what user that Meterpreter is currently running with. And in this case, they give the example, and it's NT authority system. So that would be like the root user that has the highest privileges. And then we already went over the PS command. Again, it'll just list all of the processes that are currently running. And then this is where we previously talked about a little bit migrate. So what migrate does is, so again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, so I'll try and keep this simple yet accurate. So the way that Meterpreter works, like we talked about, it's in memory. And so just to simplify, memory, we'll say for now, is distributed through a computer And each process that runs on a computer, so each one of these guys, they get their own little chunk of memory. And it's like, hey, here, this is yours, enjoy. And they're not always using all of it, but they get their own special little section of memory. And that's not exactly how it works, but hopefully this just kind of helps you understand, because this is a little bit out of the scope of the room. And so when you first run Meterpreter, it gets into the system and it gets into a process. Now it'll get into one of these processes, but let's say that you want to go to another process for a particular reason. And there's lots of different reasons to do that. You can do it to evade something, right? For evasive reasons. You might want to do it to help maintain persistence. You can do it because some commands will run better with different processes or inside different processes versus others. So there's several reasons why you may want to switch into a different process. And the way that you do that is you use the migrate command followed by the process ID. And then what Meterpreter does is it's inside its first little chunk of memory with whatever process, and then it will inject itself into a different chunk of memory for a different process. And that's how it ends up over there at another process. So when you migrate, again, you're jumping from one process to another pretty much. So hopefully that made some sense. Again, a little out of the scope of this room. The simple answer is just the migrate command will make you move from one command to another. But I know a lot of times people are like, well, how exactly does that work if Meterpreter runs only in memory and isn't installed anywhere? So that's for those people who want to know. But yeah, so migrate followed by the process ID. Again, that's why you really need to know the PS command to list all of the processes. Then you say, I want to move to, cmd.exe for whatever reason. So then you would do migrate 1276, and you use that first number, the PID, not the PPID. So just use the first number. And that's how you migrate from one thing to another. But it gives you a nice little note here, and it says, you got to be careful when you do that, because if you migrate to the wrong process, you may actually lose privileges. So you really got to pay attention and know what you're doing, and you should stick to things that have this NT authority system privilege. For the most part, there's always exceptions, but yeah, so that's how migrate works, and we'll be doing some of that. And then you also have hash dump. So hash dump is a super useful command, and what this does is this will just list the contents of the SAM database. And what's the SAM database? It's in Windows, and it stores all of the hashes. It does other stuff too, but we're not going to talk about it. But it will have all the hashes in the SAM database, and so when you do hash dump, it'll give you all those. And then you can go through the process of trying to crack them if you need to, or whatever. So hash dump, really useful command. You'll use it a lot if you're doing something in Windows. And then the search command. So search is used inside Metasploit to search for modules. But once you are inside a Meterpreter shell, right? Because this, if we look, MSF6, so this would be Metasploit, not that whole thing, just this down here, right? So this prompt means we're inside Metasploit, but this prompt, this Meterpreter, means we're inside Meterpreter. So inside Metasploit over here, search will search for modules. Over here, search followed by the -F, which stands for file name, because that's what we want to search by, will search the system for files. So in their example here, they're doing search -F, which means I want to search by the file name, and then they give you the file name of flag2.txt, and then Meterpreter will search the entire file system looking for flag2.txt, and eventually, if it finds it, it'll give you the path. So that's very useful. And then you have the shell command. So Meterpreter, once you are inside Meterpreter, right, like we said, I like to think of it as a shell. I don't know if it technically is or not. That's something I should probably Google later, because again, it is all in memory, so it is quite different than most shells. But if you need to do something from a shell on that system, you can just type in the shell command and it will create it for you. So then you get a shell on the system. And this is just like a regular shell, right? So, because sometimes there's commands that you can run or that you need to run inside a shell and not necessarily from Meterpreter. So if you have to do that, you can use the shell command and then you can run your commands from a regular shell. So keep all that in mind. Make sure you've read through everything and checked out the examples. And with that, we are done with task number 4. Now it is on to task number 5, which is where it gets fun. This is the Post-Exploitation challenge. Okay, so here you'll want to start your machine, and I already have MSF console up in the attack box. So that's what I'm using. I'm using the attack box. If you want to use your own machine, great. You can open VPN into here and then just, do they give you SSH credentials? Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure they do right down here. So these are credentials, but they don't have you SSH into it. They're going to have you actually do the PSExec. Which is, it's an exploit that you can use kind of, but it's also the way we're going to use it. You're basically just logging in to SMB. And so that's what you're going to use. That's why up here, they don't give you like any SSH credentials or anything. So don't freak out if you don't have, or if you're on your own system and you're trying to get in, they tell you how to do that. It's just all the way down here at the bottom. Okay, so that's how you get in if you're using your own system. If you're not, then you can just start your attack box, jump into a terminal, and then start MSF console. And we will do the exact same thing to get in. We'll use this same exploit with these credentials. So keep that in mind. So a couple of things that they talk about before they give us this challenge is they talk about get system and hash dump. So the get system command, what it will do is it will automatically try to escalate your privileges. So there's lots of ways to escalate privileges. You could do a whole course on just that. And well, actually there are whole courses on just that, but there's some common ways that you can escalate your privileges, and Meterpreter will try to do them automatically for you. So that's what that command does. And then you have the hash dump command. Again, we already talked about that. That'll dump all of the hashes for you. So those are going to be important to know. And then down here, they talk about the load command. So you can load different things onto your target system or into Meterpreter, right? And the way that you can do that is just by using the load command followed by whatever you want to load, right? And so what this does is this allows you to add additional tools that you can use. So a common thing that people like is they like to use Python, so you can load Python. Another one is load Kiwi, which you'll see right here. And Kiwi, if you type in load Kiwi, what that is that gives you the Mimikatz tool, which is a tool that you can use. And after you've loaded something into Meterpreter, if you hit the help command, oftentimes it'll populate with new commands for the specific tool you just downloaded. So in this case, up here, you load Kiwi, you get all of Kiwi and the Mimikatz stuff. Now, if you go to help in Meterpreter, it'll give you all these Kiwi commands that you can use. Okay, so we can even add more functionality. I mean, Meterpreter already has a bunch of utility built into it, but we can add even more by loading additional things. So keep all those commands in mind. And with that, we are going to start on our challenge. So we'll get started with question number 1. But before we do that, again, how are we going to get in? We need to get in using this. So this is going to simulate initial compromise. So in the real world, we put in all this effort and we hacked something, and now we're in. So I am just gonna search for this. It should just pull right up. And actually, I don't know why I just use search, because you can just type that in because that's the full name, and then it'll automatically put you into that module. So the search was unnecessary. So be more efficient than I am. But anyways, we're here. So now we'll show options. So the first thing that you usually want to set is going to be our hosts. And I am just going to copy that to my clipboard. And paste that in right there. And then we're going to want to set SMB password, because we need the password. Oh, I need to actually do what it's set to. So the password, I believe, was password 1. Yes. And then the username is BALLEN. So we'll set that, and then we'll set SMB user. And that will be BALLEN, I believe. So now let's take a look at our options, double check, make sure everything looks right. Okay, so see, this is why we do this, because our host did not get set. So when I did that, I was moving too fast and I didn't even notice the arrow that it threw me. So, or the error that it threw me. Jeez. So let's try that again. Our hosts. And then we'll paste that. There we go. Now show options. It's always good practice just to take a look at your options before you run anything. Double check, make sure you have everything. So here we have the computer that we're trying to attack. Here's the password to get in, and here is the username to get in. So now we can type in exploit or run, and then we will wait and see if that worked. Okay, so that didn't work. You might run into this issue with this room. Sometimes, especially when you're using something like an exploit to simulate being inside of something, it's a bit more complicated than just like SSHing into it. And so you can run into some issues and things might not always work the way they're supposed to. If that happens, just try again usually. And if you keep trying and nothing's working, double check, make sure you did it right. If you did it right and it's still not working, then restart the target machine. And maybe even restart your attack box if you need to. But the second time I ran it, it seems to be working pretty well. So let's take a look here. We'll start with get UID and see what privileges we have. Okay, so we have NT authority system, good to know. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I need to answer this question. So what is the computer name? So there's a command, I don't know if we talked about it, but it's called system info. And if you type in that, oh, nope, not system, sysinfo. That's what I meant. And if you type in that, this gives you a bunch of just basic information about the system that you have hacked into. And this will answer a lot of our questions over here. So that's good to know. However, if you look at these hints, this one, they ask you to use the sysinfo command. For this one, they actually ask you to use enum domain, which is a post module. We're not going to do that just because it takes time and the domain is already listed right here. So we don't really need to. But yeah, we'll get more into that as we go. So I'm going to copy that. That's the computer. Paste that, and now it's on to question number 2. What is the target domain? We already saw that it was Flash. So what is the name of the share likely created by the user? Okay, so here's an example. Let's go to hint, and it'll tell us, hey, you got to go to enum shares, which is a post module thing that you can run. So now what it wants you to do is it wants you to go background, you background the session, then you're going to search enum shares, and then you're going to use that, and then you're going to have to show options, and then you're going to have to fill it out, put in the IP address and everything else, right? I don't really want to do that because I'm lazy, but you probably should, just if you're wanting to learn more about Meterpreter. But just for fun, I'm going to show you another way to do it. So we're going to do sessions, and I'm going to jump on, I assume it's session 1. Yeah. So what we can do is we can do shell, and we can open up a shell on the system. And this is pretty cool. And then if we net, I think it's shares. It might be share. Net. It must be share, not shares. Yeah. So net share. And here we go. Now we can see all of the shares on the system. So why did we have to jump into the shell to do this? Why can't we just do it from Meterpreter? It's simply because Meterpreter doesn't have a command built into it that will automatically enumerate shares. At least not whatever version we're using doesn't. Maybe newer versions have. If not, they should add that. There might be some way to do it, but I don't know. So this is how I normally do it. You can just create the shell and then type in net shares, and this will tell you down here. Now we have a list of shares. Alternatively, like I said earlier, you can search for this module. You can select it by using use 0 and then fill out the R hosts, and then you can run it and you will get the same information. But I like doing it this way. It feels faster to me. Okay, so with that, now we can take a look at our shares, and most of these shares, if you're not familiar, most of these shares are normal shares that you would see on a system, except for this speedster share. That's like not a normal name that you would ever find. So, and they want to know which share was likely created by the user. So let's submit that. And that's the right answer. And so now on to the next one. What is the NTLM hash of the JChambers user? So to get out of the shell, if you decided to do it this way, you just exit, and then it puts you back into the Meterpreter shell. So now what many of you are probably thinking is, I am going to hash dump this, right? And I have not been able to do that and have it work. If I hash dump this, it will tell me your session has died, and then it'll kick me out, and then I'll have to go through this whole exploit up here to actually get in. So if you do that a couple of times, and then you're like, what the heck, why isn't this working? If you go to the hint, it says you will need to migrate to the lsass.exe process first. Okay, so we're going to follow their instructions. That's the only way I've gotten it to work. Maybe if somebody's lucky, you might be able to just hash dump from here and get the hash. But I haven't been able to do it. So first, let's do PS. And this will list all of our processes. And we are looking for that it's LSS or L something. LSASS. So that's number 760. So now we can migrate, type in the PID, which is 760, and now Meterpreter will start moving itself into that process. So now that we're in that process, let's take a look at so we're NT authority system still. So let's try hash dumping this. And there we go. We can see all of our hashes. Now, again, these are NTLM hashes. So this first half, more often than not, is useless. You don't actually want it. You don't use it for anything because it's outdated. So usually we'll take this second hash back here, and this is the useful one. So we'll take that, paste it in, and submit. And that's the correct answer. Now they want to know, what is the clear text password of the J Chambers user? Now, in the real world, you would want to use a really nice word list, and you would probably want to use either John the Ripper or Hashcat to crack this. But because I know that this is just a pretty straightforward TryHackMe challenge, I'm going to use an online hash cracker. So I'm just using the CrackStation, crackstation.net. It's an online hash cracker, and it will do simple hashes for you. So I'll paste that in, let them know I'm a real human. Do those count as stairs? Dude, sometimes those questions are hard. Crack the hash, and then it gives us trust no one is the result. So we can copy that and just paste that into there. Submit that. Sweet. Okay, so now it's asking us, where's the secret.txt file located? And that's secrets, plural. Okay, so it looks like our session died. I may have accidentally killed it. I hit Control-C. Or sometimes they just die. It's pretty normal. So, wait a minute. It told me it died. Timed out. Okay, yeah, it died. So if I go back to sessions and look, I have no sessions. So what I can do is I can just hit run again, because in Metasploit, all of your settings are already saved, if that makes sense, because we already ran this exploit. So it didn't want to work the first time. Let's see if it'll work the second time. Nope. Okay, so this is one of those times where you either wait a minute and you can keep trying to run it. You can double check, make sure that things are working, or you can restart your attack machine, or you can restart your attack box and the target machine, or one or the other, to see if you can figure out what's going on. I'm gonna just try running this again. There we go. So now it decided to work for me, had to run it a few times. So now while we have it, we're gonna search -F. So F stands for file name, and we're gonna search by file name, and it was secrets, not two C's, .txt, I believe. Let me double check before I waste my time and run that. Secrets.txt. Yep. Okay, so we can run that, and it probably might take a minute, so you can just wait and hopefully it'll pull up some results. Okay, so that actually took a minute and it gave me the results though. This is where the secret.txt file is. So we're gonna copy that and paste it because it asks us for the path. And that's the correct answer. Now, what is the Twitter password revealed in the secrets.txt file? Now, honestly, what I want you to do is, especially if you're just starting out in Meterpreter and you do not use it a lot, just try and get there on your own, just for fun. Because I remember when I very first started, I started a lot of learning hacking and cybersecurity on Linux. And so I was really used to using Linux, and I would try to type in Windows things like Linux, and it just wouldn't work. So you pause it, try it yourself. Once you've done that, if you got it on your first try, congrats, you're smarter than I was. But a lot of times, so if I just try and cat, let's just do this for fun. So I'm just gonna paste that right in there, and let's try and cat it. It says operation failed, the system cannot find the file specified, blah, 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 blah. So you could go through and try and edit this and get it to go through these. But if you'll notice, there's spaces in these names, and you have to deal with that, right? Because the computer will just read it straight through, and then it's like, yeah, no, we can't find that file. So the way that you can do this, and what's the easiest, is just put double quotes around the whole file path. So if you do that and put the whole thing around quotes, then it will read it for you. So keep that in mind. Sometimes people will be doing stuff and you won't even notice, because if it's like a really long file name, you might not notice a space in there. And so yeah, if something's not working and you're trying to either get somewhere, read something, just put quotations around it, and that should help. So now it wants to know where's the real secret.txt. So we're going to do the same thing. Search -F for file name, and that was real secret.txt. Was it real secrets or real secret? Real secret. Okay, so not plural. Real secret.txt. So we can search for that, and we'll wait and see how long that takes to pull up. Okay, so that pulled up, and here is our full file path. So we can just copy that, paste it in there, and that's the correct answer. And then they want to know what is the real secret. I'm sure that is inside. So we have to cat, and then again, use those quotation marks. Just makes things a bit easier. And then you know it'll work. So the Flash is the fastest man alive. So we'll copy that, come into here, paste it. So with that, you have finished task number 7. If you guys found the video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. And with that, you have finished the Metasploit Meterpreter room from TryHackMe.